Most people buying a new TV or phone think they're getting a mind-blowing cinematic experience just because the screen says 4K. But here's the brutal truth. If your content is stuck in HDR, you are effectively watching a 2026 display through a lens of a 1990s box television. Look at the image. On the far left, you see HDR represented by that old bulky CRT monitor. HDR stands for Standard Dynamic Range. It's the ancient foundation that every piece of video tech was built on for decades. Think of HDR like a box of crayons, but you only get 16 colors to work with. No matter how hard you press down on the yellow crayon, it's never going to look like actual sunlight. No matter how dark you try to shade with the black crayon, it just looks like a muddy, washed out gray. When you watch a movie in HDR, the brightest white your screen can produce and the darkest black it can drop to are incredibly close together. If a director shoots a scene with a character standing in front of a bright window, HDR forces a terrible compromise. Either the camera exposes for the person's face, turning the window into a featureless white blob, or it exposes for the window, turning the character into a pitch black shape with zero detail. We tolerated this for 50 years because our old glass TVs physically couldn't do anything better. They topped out at 100 nits of brightness. Yet, a massive amount of the content we consume daily is still trapped in this legacy HDR format. It's safe, it works on every screen ever made, but it's completely holding your hardware back. Now we move to the true baseline of modern high fidelity video. Look at the second icon from the left in this photo, HDR10. If you buy a 4K Blu-ray, stream a modern show at Disney Plus, or boot up a game on a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, HDR10 is the absolute bare minimum standard. HDR10 changes the game by entirely replacing the old 16 crayon box with a massive palette of over 1 billion colors. It shifts from 8-bit color depth to 10-bit color depth. In the real world, when you look at a sunset, you see a perfectly smooth, endless gradient from deep purple to fiery orange to bright yellow. In HDR, because there aren't enough colors, that sunset gets broken up into ugly, blocky rings, a flaw called color banding. HDR10 completely eliminates this. However, HDR10 has a massive, fatal flaw built into its DNA. It relies entirely on what the industry called static metadata. Imagine you are sitting down to watch a 2-hour psychological thriller. The movie opens with a blindingly bright scene of a main character walking across a scorching desert. An hour later, the movie transitions into a pitch black, tense basement scene where a flashlight is the only source of light. When the director finishes editing this movie in HDR10, the computer looks at the entire 2-hour file, finds the single brightest frame in the whole film, and finds the darkest frame. It then creates one single fixed rulebook for your TV to use for the entire duration of the movie. Because that rulebook is locked from start to finish, your TV has to make severe compromises. To make sure the desert scene doesn't completely blow out, it has to lower its overall brightness ceiling. But when the movie cuts to that dark basement, the TV is still using that exact same locked rulebook. As a result, the dark scenes end up looking way too dark, muddy, and crushed. You lose the texture of the brick walls, and the shadows swallow all the detail. HDR10 is a massive leap forward, but its static nature means it's constantly fighting against itself. To fix this exact problem, tech companies realized they needed a system that could change its rules on the fly. Look at the second icon from the right in this photo. This format was spearheaded largely by Samsung and Panasonic as an open source royalty-free answer to the static limitation of base HDR10. The secret weapon here is dynamic metadata. Remember that 2-hour thriller with the desert and the basement? Instead of creating one single rulebook for the entire film, HDR10 Plus allows the video file to send a brand new set of instructions to your TV screen every single second, frame by frame, scene by scene. When the movie is playing the desert scene, the metadata tells your TV, maximize your brightness. The moment the movie cuts to the dark basement, the metadata instantly changes, instructing your TV, drop the black levels, open up the shadow detail. The difference this makes in real-world viewing is night and day. You are no longer watching a compromised average of the movie's brightest and darkest moments. Instead, every individual shot is tailored perfectly to the exact capabilities of your specific display. The highlights are blindingly bright exactly where they need to be, and the shadows retain pristine clarity without looking washed out. It took the incredible color volume of HDR10 and gave it a brain. If you look back in the image, on the far right, there is a format labeled HLG, showing a football stadium. This is hybrid log gamma. Out of all the modern formats, this is the weirdest, most fascinating compromise in video history. And it exists for one major reason: live television. When Netflix or HBO wants to stream a movie, they can send a massive, heavy file container packed with extra data straight to your smart TV. But when BBC, ESPN, or Sky Sports is broadcasting a live football match to 10 million homes simultaneously, they have a massive infrastructure nightmare. Half of those 10 million viewers are watching on brand new, expensive HDR displays. The other half are still watching on older SDR screens. Broadcasting two separate signals, one for old TVs and one for new TVs, would completely break the airwaves. It requires double the bandwidth, double the equipment, and billions of dollars in upgrades. Enter HLG. Co-developed by the BBC and NHK, it is a single video signal that splits down the middle like a fork in the road. When an old SDR TV receives an HLG broadcast, it ignores the extra highlight data and displays a standard, perfectly fine picture. But when a modern HDR screen receives that exact same signal, it unlocks the upper layer of data, instantly boosting the brightness of the stadium lights, deepening the grass textures, and making the jersey colors pop. It is incredibly efficient, but because it has to be backwards compatible with old tech, it lacks the true cinematic precision of the heavy hitters. It's the king of live sports and news. But it's just the first real step away from the dark ages. Finally, we arrive at the absolute pinnacle of consumer display technology. Look right at the center of this photo. Dolby Vision. There's a reason this logo is plastered all over premium movie theaters, high-end OLED TVs, and flagship mastering studios. It is the gold standard, and it takes everything we've just discussed to an entirely different dimension. While HDR10 Plus brought dynamic metadata, Dolby Vision pushes the physical hardware limits to what displays can even achieve. Where HDR10 and HDR10 Plus max out at 10-bit color, Dolby Vision is built to support up to 12-bit color depth. Instead of a box of 1 billion colors, Dolby Vision unlocks a staggering palette of nearly 68 billion colors. Even though consumer TVs right now can't fully display every single one of these 68 billion colors yet, Dolby Vision is completely future-proofed for the next decade of display advancements. Furthermore, while standard HDR formats are mastered at around 1000 nits of peak brightness, Dolby Vision can be mastered all the way up to 4000 or even 10,000 nits. But its real magic is how it talks to your TV. It uses an incredibly advanced process called display mapping. Every TV handles brightness differently. A premium expensive OLED might display deep blacks but lower peak brightness, while a bright mini LED panel might blast your eyes with light but struggle with absolute darkness. Dolby Vision knows the exact make, model, and physical limitations of your specific TV panel. When it reads the dynamic metadata, it doesn't just blindly throw instructions at the screen. It recalculates the image in real time to look exactly the way Hollywood colorists intended it to look on your specific hardware. It is the closest you can possibly get to knowing out a real window. When you are setting up your next movie night or looking at your display settings, don't just settle for a high resolution. Look for those dynamic formats like HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision. They are the true secret to making your hardware show you what it's actually capable of.